Okay, we are live. Hello, my name is Daniel Backer, and welcome to Write Better Stories. Joining me today is Robert McCormack. So I know Robert. I guess we met in Los Angeles, and I know you through our mutual friend Sean Gotzi. And
I
you're actually,
feel like I've known you longer than I actually have because of Sean, but yeah.
yeah, you're actually still in my phone as Robert Sean's friend.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but no, I crashed on your guys' couch when I first moved to LA, but for whatever reason, you were like in and out of the house. So I just like vaguely remember hearing your voice one day when waking up, and that was like the extent of our meeting. So
I was in a depressive fog that whole time, so I have very little memory of that period of time. So yeah, we got to know each other much better in working together. So yeah.
that's right. So yeah, Robert also got me a job as a writer at a immigration law firm, and that was a very pivotal point in my life at the time. And likewise, was in a depressive fog just from living in LA and trying to pay bills.
We shared many a breakfast burrito at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a wonderful period in my life.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we would also like among making really inappropriate jokes. And sometimes when people had come into the office and we thought we were the only ones there, we'd also discuss like writing quite a bit and like
Yes.
things that we liked about stories and things like that because Robert is a writer. And I guess how would you describe your primary focus in writing? Is it mostly about like TV
Well,
or?
I would say it's funny you say this. I was just talking to someone about how I do feel my focus is evolving. I came out to LA as, a out of a college dropout with a focus on, you know, television, a little bit on film and television, basically screenwriting. I had a manager in LA, and I have a writing partner still in LA. We shared the same manager, a lot of the same endeavors. And I guess slowly over the course of the past decade, I have realized that maybe I don't necessarily want the grind of living in Los Angeles and struggling to bounce from show to show. In some ways, it's a very well, obviously, it's a very tough business to break into, and that's the long and short of it. I didn't break in yet. I do think, I do hold out some hope. My writing partner, Alex, and I, he's eminently more successful than I am, and I fully expect to ride his coattails when he gets his first project financed, which we're hoping to be the feature film we've written together. That's all a long-winded way of saying I actually inspired a lot by you to try and, try my hand at, fiction writing. Yeah, I feel like every writer says they have a novel inside them, and I'm like every other writer. I think I have a novel inside me, but also, there's so many different mediums I'm interested in now. Podcasting, I think, I think there is a great potential to tell some stories that I'm interested in that would, work well in that medium. Um, Essentially, it boils down to wanting to I don't want my stories just sitting on a hard drive where no one will read them, which tends to be the case for unproduced film and TV scripts. That's not to say I'm not working in that field, in that area as well, because I am, but I also would love to be able to write something that, even if it's just my mother that reads it, that will that's more than people, that would mean a lot. So I am trying to broaden my horizons a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like, but yeah, a storyteller in a lot of different mediums, I guess.
Cool. No, I get that kind of uncertainty about like which medium really calls to you the most, because even though I would say like my primary love and focus is fiction, I have worked in film, at least in creative projects, quite a bit over the past couple years, and a lot of that is just because I know films are easier to consume, and
Yeah,
like somebody telling you like, hey, read my manuscript for this novel, or like read my finished novel, that's like assigning somebody a lot of work. Whereas even though I'm not like as super passionate about film or TV, it's just nice knowing that it's like you might actually get people to experience the story, because as fun as it is to work on it and see it develop, like you actually want people to consume the story that you're doing.
exactly, exactly. And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized I don't need to be pigeonholed into just one thing. For so long, TV. It was just TV. I was writing TV pilots. That was the only thing I was having my manager submit me for, was like TV shows. And the only stories I was coming up with things that I was like, this would be a great TV show. I never. I've written so many stories that don't have endings because I was only writing pilots, and you know, I just, I realize I want to, I can do more. I guess I just had to break out of that shell a little bit. And, my current focus right now is, a feature. I haven't written a feature on my own since college. And, I want to have one in my back pocket in case things with, the feature that Alex, my writing partner, and I are working on take off, take off. But in case things happen with that, I want to have another feature in my back pocket to say, hey, look at this. But at the same time, I'm also developing a novel and looking at ideas for a podcast. So I just don't want to be one kind of storyteller. I think there's a lot of different stories in me. It's just a matter of getting them out there to the world, I guess.
I get that, and I definitely get that inclination to like, because I feel like I don't have any ideas for a feature film, but I just know that I want to write one because it just seems like an important thing to do as a writer. But then I think it would be easier, maybe not like creatively, but just in terms of length, to like approach some shorts. But there's something about having a feature film script that just feels more appealing. But then, kind of like to go to contrast, like what you said, if you're only working on these like big Goliath projects, then you don't really have that portfolio to show people. You're just
Exactly.
like, I kind of feel like that with working on this novel for so many years now, and I am proud of it. But at the same time, like when it's done, I'm just like, okay, well, here is like one of two major projects that I've done, and I don't really have this like portfolio. So I think once I finish this, I'm going to try to dedicate my time toward making like a lot of smaller things,
That's
so that
great.
I have
Yeah.
like a deck to show people instead of just being like, well, you have this or this. And other than that, like that's my career as a writer.
Yeah, that is absolutely something I want to work on, is building up a portfolio. My portfolio right now primarily consists of about three or four pilots that I'm very proud of. And I think they're very representative of what I can do. But I want more than just TV pilots. I want a written prose. I want that feature in there. Like I said, I feel like I've got a novel in me and I've got some ideas. It's just I think for me, I'm very self-conscious, as most writers are. But it is very daunting. I haven't written like that. I don't have, a formal training in, that kind of fiction writing. So, um, I tend to second guess myself a lot, and for a lot of false beginnings, false starts. I put something down on paper and then I'm just like, wow, this is garbage. Why would this is pretentious garbage? Why would anyone want to read this? And then I stop, I go back to the feature, and then, I read a book and I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And so it's a painful process, for me at least, getting into fiction writing, but it's something as I enter my 30s, I am determined to do. So
So when you have all of those different projects going, how do you evaluate like what you're going to do anytime you sit down to write? Because there's only so many hours in the day. So do you have any kind of structure to that, or is it just like
oh, that
whatever
is
you're
a
feeling that day?
fantastic question. It's my gut, my passion. Like, it's like whatever is interesting to me, I know that's not the right way to work, but I have always been driven by what is on my mind right now. So um, you know, I'm living in, you know this, but for the audience, I'm living in the Boston area right now, and I feel very connected to my surroundings. And I've always wanted to tell a story, that has some significance to the area. So like right now, I'm adapting on spec a book about the worst unsolved serial killing in Massachusetts. And I'm trying to take it deep. On paper that sounds kind of a little generic and a little cliched. Those are types of movies I enjoy watching, but I'm trying to get beneath the genre trappings, I guess. And what I'm trying to say is that's like what's really on my mind right now. That is, I read this book and it's got me going, and I've got ideas. I've got scenes that I are starting to play out in my head, and that's when I know, oh shit, I need to be writing this. I need to be writing this down like now, because it's coming. It's flowing. You know, and then that means the novel I have is on the back burner. It's very much driven by my, creative, my passionate whims, I guess. So, probably not the most productive way to work, but I found the things that I've written that I love the most, that I'm the most proud of, have always come out of that kind of that feeling. So it's like what I can bury my head into, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. Yeah, and I kind of go back and forth on that because like I hear of a lot of really successful writers that they just turn it into a day job. And so they're just like, I don't worry about inspiration. I just write 8 hours a day and clock in and out. And maybe not 8 hours, like maybe they're talking a big game. But like I I try to put myself on that schedule. But what's kind of unfortunate is that I think part of the process, at least for me, is just letting things ruminate sometimes. Like sometimes the
Yeah,
best thing you can do is just
100%.
to kind of like get it out of your face and forget about it for a while. And then it's easy to kind of approach it with an objective eye the next time that you look at it.
Absolutely. And frankly, I don't have the luxury to at the moment to make like creative writing my day job. I would love that. But I do, like, I obviously I work a job that is writing focused. So when I do have the time to work to write for myself, it has to be something that I'm in love with, that I really want, a story I really want to tell, because I spend the rest of the day, you know, uh, working in like technical writing, very boring. You obviously know, it's dull, and so when I do sit back down at the same desk I work at, it has to be something that really gets me going and that I'm excited to. And it right now I'm feeling it, which is exciting, because for a long time, to be honest with you, I have not been feeling it. I think 2020 kicked my but I like it did pretty much everyone. I think you've probably been an inspiration. You've been more active than a lot of us in our community. But I definitely am trying to like make up for lost time, I guess. I feel like I haven't had that fire in me for a while, and now it's starting to come back for whatever reason. So yeah, it has to be something I am fiery about, and thankfully the story I'm working on now is something that is exciting. So yeah, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, that makes sense because as much as I wish I was somebody that could write 8 hours a day and had that luxury, um, I almost feel like a failure that I'm like not one of those people. But then at the same time, in my heart of hearts, I don't think I have more than about 2 hours of creative writing in me on any given day. That like, and I've done it where I felt like I was so inspired and like smoked a lot of weed, and so that kind of put me in a place where I was like, oh, I'm really doing it. And it's like, I don't know if hour 4 or hour 6 was even really good anymore. It just kind of felt like I had numbed myself into this position where I felt like I was really doing it, but then it's not really sustainable, at least for me, to write like that. And so it is, maybe this is my big excuse, but it's kind of nice to have just this thing of like show up every day, but the time limit is just kind of contingent on how productive it feels. And so there have been plenty of
Yeah,
times I'll go to a coffee shop to write, and after maybe 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, you know what? It's not happening today. And
Danny, I'm the same exact way.
yeah,
Which, by the way, I friggin' miss the days of coffee shops. I around here at least we can't. There's no either. I can't really go into a coffee shop at the moment and sit and write. But I miss those days so much. But yeah, it's for me. It is like if the scenes are flowing, I'm gonna work it for as long as as it can come out. And then when I feel like I've hit a wall, I know I've hit a wall. Uh, you know, Hopefully that is 10 pages. Sometimes it's 2.5 pages, or it's a page, half a page that I've rewritten like 5 times until I feel like it feels good. I'm very much a rewriter, which slows me down. I've always been that way, and it is not the best way to write, but it's just something in my head that
oh, see, I
works that.
disagree. I think like I am always suspicious when I hear somebody tell me that they don't rewrite. Like to me, that is just,
Really?
and it's usually a brag. They're usually like, yeah, it just came out really good. But I feel like they're kind of giving away. They're like, I haven't developed a process, and this comment about to have you read is not going to be very good.
Well, I mean more that, well, yeah, what you're saying is true because I feel like I've run into those people. But I'm also like, rather than picking up where I left off and continuing on, oftentimes I just, at the start of a new session, I start at the beginning of the script and I'm reading through it. And then I'm like, okay, this scene needs a little work. Blah, 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 blah. And it kind of slows the whole process down a little bit. And rather than like, you do your first draft and then you go back and, I'm kind of rewriting as I go. And that's not to say I'm not rewriting again when I finish the project, but the number of times my pilots, for example, have evolved from, where they initially began to the finished product, it's a habit of my rewriting as I work on it. So and I guess at this point I've just recognized that it's my style. It's how I work. It's not the most productive. Or no, I guess it is productive, but it's a little bit more time consuming. It's just how I'm hardwired as a writer. I'm just very nitpicky like that.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think before I was willing to do a lot of rewriting of my own, that the idea of having to go over the same scene many times just seemed like the worst thing in the world. But now that like, especially for this manuscript that I sent you, now that I've like been willing to do that, that's actually like I think one of the most rewarding parts of it is because I remember when I thought I was like done with it a couple years ago. And what I had really done was I'd taken all of these writings from different stories and just put them in the same document. And to me, I was like, yeah, it's a novel. It's like over 100 pages long. And then after actually looking at it critically, I was like, oh, these scenes do not belong in the same story at all. And I just
Yeah.
convinced myself in order to be done that they were. But then, like, after I was actually willing to cut stuff and do some rewriting, what I have now, not that it's finished, but compared to what I had then, is just like I'm really proud of it, you know. Whereas
Yeah.
I never would have gotten to that point if I had believed that rewriting was just like drudgery. Because there is so much about writing dialogue, and I don't mean like in the script, but like people talking about writing that they're
Sure.
just like, if it's not pain, then you're not doing it right. And like I think that's kind of like indulgent and masturbatory because
Ugh.
like really, yeah, it's a ton of work. It's hard, but like that if you really commit to it, at least in my experience, it makes it good and it actually does get a lot more fun, I think.
I feel like this is cliched as hell, but it for me, it's like going to the gym, you know? Like getting there is the hardest part, like sitting down and looking at the blank page. Last night, I literally started working on this treatment of the feature, and I feel like I've been looking at the blank page in my, word processor for weeks. And then finally, I typed the words New Bedford, Massachusetts, July 1982, and then I'm off. And it feels like it for me. It feels like exercise. Like I feel good when I'm done. I'm like, oh yeah, I woke up in a good mood today. I never wake up in a good mood. I feel like my medicine is working. I like wrote something. I'm a writer again, and I'm looking forward to writing a few pages tonight. So yeah, I don't know what I was trying to say there, but yeah, that's kind of how it works for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, believe me, dude. Yeah, it's like that initial step is the hardest part, and so something I know we've talked about before, but it's relevant because I not only did this today, but I made another video on my channel about it for writer's block. I've been struggling with this scene in the manuscript for a really long time, and I don't know if the thought in my head really occurred that I had writer's block, but every idea I had for it just fell flat. The draft that's in the manuscript right now, I just think is objectively not good. And I just really started to put off writing for it. And so the past 2 days, I just forced myself to just like not even write the actual scene, but like write about what I wanted it to be. And I think I'm like kind of tricking myself to get into actually writing the scene because
Yes.
like
Yeah.
even you saying like sitting there staring at the blank page, it's such a feeble feeling. And so like I got that from Julia Cameron's book The Artist's Way, and her whole thing is just about like write morning pages, that it's kind of like journaling, and then you can kind of steer that momentum into your creative work.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so, like some of these lines that got me to the things that I wanted to actually write about were just garbage. And it's just this feeling in my gut of being like, this is not productive. None of this is going into the book. But like having to kind of train that muscle in my head that was just like, this will be a diving board towards something worth keeping. But you just like, it's almost like you got to stop worrying about the words and just be like, I just have to keep doing this. Like,
Yes.
at some
Yeah.
point, something worth keeping is going to fall out. But it's like it's a little game you have to play with yourself.
I know what I'm putting down on paper right now, probably, is going to evolve and change. I mean, my God, the feature that I've been working on with Alex, my writing partner, I'll just call him Alex from now on. 7 years. 7 years we have been working on this thing, and it has evolved so much. And really, only in the past 2 years have we gotten it into like its final shape, like a story we feel is unique and worth telling. But it has just it was just the persistency, just sticking at it, putting stuff down. Not all of it worked. We did multiple drafts. It began as a oh god, it began as a like a limited TV series pilot, and then that it was in that form for years, and then we kind of took it back in the direction of a feature, and we were writing the feature and we didn't like the setup we had. Just all that to say, well, we stayed with it for those 7 long years, and finally we're nearing the finish line with a product that feels worth it. But there was a lot of crap that came before, that, and it is just, I don't know. We felt there was a nugget of something that worked in that
Well, I was
story.
going to ask you about that. Is that like, because that can feel a lot like spinning your wheels, and that's, I think, the moment of doom, at least in my own writing. Like, I've hit that several points with this manuscript of being like, this might not be finished. Like, this might just die on the table.
I get it. Yeah.
So, like, what about it? What were you like? Oh, there's some, like that made all the crap worth it.
We had this single idea, and a sea creature washes up on the shores of well, not even, because it used to be a remote village. Now it's just a sea creature washes up on a beach, and it starts, as it decays, it begins to have a strange effect on the surrounding people. Just very, we loved that idea. A sea creature, it's decaying, and it's somehow affecting the people around it. And that has evolved from this big ensemble drama about a village gone crazy into this more with even more like sci-fi overtones, but now it's a very simple, grounded drama. The three women, three generations of women, and the conflict is mostly is based on their relationship. The sea creature's appearance is a catalyst for all of this craziness to happen, and that's the only supernatural element in the script, really. But we loved that central idea, this one unbelievable aspect, and then the rest grounded human drama. And that's really what got us through it. We loved that central idea. We knew we had something to work with. Over the years, we've talked to it with our manager and with different, Alex has shown it to different or pitched it to different executives, and the responses have been very positive. So we knew we had something that was worth exploring, but it has literally evolved from like an Alaskan fishing village to the British Isles in World War II, to now it's 1930s Cape Cod. So it has just, the story itself has evolved, and characters have been, we've literally wiped the slate clean multiple times, but it was that one kernel of an idea that we loved and we did not want to give up on. We knew it had bones, so to speak, and that's what kept us going this whole time. And finally, it's coming into something that we feel is, Alex, as the would-be director, if this ever gets financed, it feels something that's eminently producible, but we could do it on a modest budget, that it's a story worth telling. We're just it has just taken a long time of evolving and being committed to that one idea that we love. So yeah, that's kind of what drove us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a ton, because just to like have the stamina and like the determination to completely wipe the slate clean because I've definitely made some major cuts in my stuff, but I don't know if I've ever thrown out and started from square one. So that's pretty incredible that you're able
I
to do that.
hadn't either. This is the only. I have to give credit to Alex because he really kept the ship going. Because I know there were times when I felt very frustrated and was like I for a long time. I was really committed to the idea of it being like a mini series. I thought it would be a great limited series. I was a big fan of Stephen King's Under the Dome, and I was always very heartbroken how they butchered that as a television show because I thought it would make a great limited series. So in some ways, I felt like there were parallels with this piece. And so when we decided to turn it into a feature, I was kind of like, oh, really? Like, I don't want to start from scratch, but I'm glad we did because it is. I love what we have now, and I'm really excited for it. If anything, it's taught me, going forward that maybe throwing it all out and starting from scratch, as painful as it may be, isn't always a bad thing. If you've got some of those seeds there, you can start and grow something fresh. So yeah.
That takes just like so much trust. That's amazing because anytime that I think that both inexperienced but also kind of immature in terms of collaborations because if I'm working on just something by myself and I think a major change needs to be made, I have all the plates spinning in my head that I know what I feel like needs to happen. And I also only have myself to answer to. But then if I feel like if I was in a collaboration and the other person suggested throwing everything out, then I would like put one foot out the door and be like, I don't know if I could like trust them that it would be worth it to continue to work on it, Like
It is all about trust, I have to say. I've learned that. Alex and I are good friends. We actually went to high school together, and oh, you've met Alex. What am I thinking? But yeah, we went to high school together, and we were friends first. And he's a very talented writer. He's bound for success any day now. But there is a trust now, I think, as especially on this project. He's great with like the big picture stuff, the mythology, big themes, and things like that. I tend to be really good with like the smaller detail, the dialogue, small character beats, individual scenes, and then he's really good at kind of helping to link it all together. And we were just speaking last night, and he's pitched a couple of great, just thematic things to throw in there to just give it an even richer, environment. But we trust each other, and that's scary because I'm very self-conscious. I oftentimes think he's the better writer than I am, and it always feels good when he comes back and says, "Oh my God, I love what you've done here. This works really well." And we even each other out. We have strengths. We each have our strengths. We each have our weaknesses, and together it's worked on. Who knows if it'll work on other projects? I hope it will. But on this particular project, we have really worked well together, and it's I think it's creating something really special. But he's the only person I've like written something with and that I feel good about. So yeah, I don't know. It is all about trust.
Yeah, I mean that's great because I envy that in a lot of ways because I think just for the camaraderie of collaboration and to have like those multiple ideas that I found at least satisfying in like improv and other mediums, not necessarily writing, is really nice because it is just as simple as like people coming up with something you never in a million years would have thought of, but then you get to plug that into your own thing and you make something that's like greater than the sum of its parts, which is really cool. But I do feel like I try to get that through getting notes, where it's like,
Sure.
even though I'm technically steering the ship on this manuscript, by giving it to other people to give me notes in a little way, it is kind of like a collaboration, because it's very rare someone will only give me criticisms. Usually what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, I see what you're going for, but you should do this instead of this. And a lot of times, like, what they take from it isn't something I intended at all, but it does just show you
Interesting.
like how the idea is coming across. And then you kind of get their idea for free, even though they felt like it was just given in the form of a criticism, you know?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Um, part speaking of like collaboration, part of the reason that I was so drawn to TV is I love the idea, and not everyone likes this idea, but I like the idea of a writer's room. Some of the best stories I've ever seen told, while there's usually a singular voice, writing the ship, take the Sopranos, for example. David Chase wrote and rewrote a lot of scripts himself, and was really, that whole show, it has his mark all over it. But there are a lot of very talented individual writers who did their own thing on episodes and contributed in a room. And I love the idea of contributing in a room. And again, I don't think I'm a perfect, not that anyone thinks they're a perfect, well, I'm sure there are people that think they're perfect writers, but you
I've got a
know
couple in LA.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I like the idea of being able to grow and evolve with other like-minded, writers, and all in the pursuit of telling this one story, and these overarching themes and storylines. And that's what always drew me to television, was working in a room. And I still maybe, I think if I was offered the opportunity, that would be fun. But I have kind of come to terms with working individually, and I at least get my fix with by having a writing partner to work with, and I think he has taught me a lot, personally, as a writer. So yeah.
I wanted to stay on The Sopranos for a little bit, because I
Yes,
know that that
please.
is one of your favorite shows, and you were constantly telling me to watch that in LA. And I finally, with the pandemic and having the luxury of being at my parents' house and they have HBO Max, I'm like finally going through it. I finally finished the first season, and
Oh,
like, just to get it out of the way, obviously, like, I see what all the fuss is about. It's amazing. Um, uh, why can't I think of his James Gandolfini's performance is just like next level. And I found out the other day on a podcast that he was only like 36 during the filming of that pilot. And I'm just like so blown away by all of it.
it just gets richer and more complex as it's a series that I don't think has a um people might say that the typical consensus is that maybe season 4 is a little slow, and that the first half of season 6 is its weakest point. But even at its weakest, The Sopranos is still miles and miles above, every other television show out there. So, and there are fascinating parts of, even like, there's one episode in season 4 that's a real dud, but there's still good elements to it. But yeah, it just, Gandolfini is, oh my god, he's just remarkable. Edie Falco is incredible. There's not a weak link in that cast. There's so many incredible actors passed through that show, and just the writing absolutely revolutionized the way television writing is done. I mean, the whole show, it made its mark not just on cable, but on all of television. But yeah, it is. I'm excited for you to continue experiencing it.
I mean, I'm just excited. Like, I've had this experience with a lot of Thomas Pynchon's novels where they're so long and so dense, but that's what I love about it, because I'm just like, oh, I get 500 more pages of this. That it's just like I almost love getting to take my time with it, because it is so dense and like rich, like you said, is a really good example. But do you know anything more about specifically, because you said it changed the way that like TV was written? So could you talk more about that? Because that's like absolutely within the purview of this channel.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, it ushered in a new age of like cable existed before The Sopranos, obviously, but there had never been a cable drama that was quite as I keep using the word rich, but that it's what comes to mind. Rich, dense. That had been quite as mature and well produced as this, or that hit it off with the main with mainstream audiences, quite like The Sopranos. I mean, it is, a lot of times television nowadays is described as like a novelistic approach, and like a novel as television. And The Sopranos really, takes that to heart. It's supremely serialized, and things in the early seasons pay off years down the road, and it's just so mature in that sense. Also, the anti-hero, Tony Soprano, not the first. I kind of think of Andy Sipowicz on NYPD Blue as one of the first, TV anti-heroes to a degree. I don't know if you're familiar with NYPD Blue. It was created by David Milch, who would go on to work a lot at HBO with Deadwood. And he created a character that was initially very difficult to love and had a lot of, you know, uh, problematic areas. But Tony Soprano was one of, I mean, and in fact, the whole Soprano family, they're monsters. There isn't really an redeemable character among them, with the exception of maybe Dr. Melfi. But I mean, the Sopranos as a whole, as the series go on, they are monsters. They're awful people, and yet, it's written in a way where you are rooting for the monsters. I mean, look at that pilot episode where it's Tony runs over a guy and breaks his legs in public. I mean, you see that happen in real life. You'd want that guy carted off to jail. But The Sopranos somehow makes Tony likable, even though he is quite possibly a sociopath. He is, abusive to his physically abusive to and emotionally abusive to his partners. He's a murderer. He is truly a awful individual, but because of Tony Soprano, that kind of opened the door for your Don Drapers, your Walter Whites, your Al Swearingens. It really, it without the Sopranos, you wouldn't have Breaking Bad and Mad Men and all the characters that we, trouble, complicated anti-heroes that, have kind of come to define Ozark, the shows about, you know, men and women doing bad things. So I think that's kind of how I think of it as changing television. How it's writing changed television. I mean, there's a reason it won an Emmy for writing every single year, with the exception of season 2, which is even a little crazy. But every year it was eligible, it won the Emmy for writing, and there are so many individual episodes that just work on their own as a piece of television, and then in the greater whole of the season. So there's so many episodes that I go to when I want creative inspiration, yeah. I'm sure there's an even more academic answer to that, but
No, that is
that's
great.
kind of how, in my eyes, it changed TV.
Yeah, because I think that is interesting, and I think one of the main things that I took from that, because I mean that was like a lot of information that you said, but I think that like something that made my ears perk up was just that we do root for him so much, even though he is this bad guy, and I find it interesting because a lot of times the image that comes to mind when I think of an anti-hero, I don't even know if it's from a specific movie, but I just think of a dude like in a leather jacket and like not really betraying any emotion. Like it's just kind of like the straw man anti-hero of like, I'm not your daddy's hero, you know? But then I think that
Yeah,
like, one of the things that does make you root for Tony, other of course than the fact that it's like obviously a work of fiction and like nobody's really dying, is that like he through his performance but also the writing just has so many moments of vulnerability where
well, exactly. Yeah.
and it's like it's all in the eyes and it really just shows how great James Gandolfini is as an actor because it almost doesn't look like it's a choice. It almost looks like he is just so lost in that character that just with this like these little eye movements, especially when he's in therapy, you really see him struggling to maintain this facade of being this tough guy and then like being affectionate with his friends and family members in addition to being abusive and like having that short fuse with his temper that like you kind of forgive the bad stuff because you see that this is like a real authentic guy who is like a soft little core on the inside.
It is, yeah, it's a fascinating character, and this one, I'm not going to give anything away, but there's one particular moment, a scene that I recently Vulture did a piece where they called it like why James Gandolfini's performance as Tony Soprano is one of the greatest of all times, and they took a scene from a therapy session between him and Dr. Melfi in season 5, and it is you'll know it when you see it. It's very profound, and he just does so much with so little. He can be a very funny character, and that is very disarming. And then, he can go from, being very funny 1 minute to, you know, genuinely terrifying the next. And, you know, but he also struggles with things that we all struggle with, relationships with the relationship with his mother, even though that's obviously an outsized kind of thing, but having a problematic relationship with a parent, and his raising kids, and maintaining his relationship with his wife, and he struggles with all the things that normal people struggle with, and yet he's also something not many people are, which is a mob boss, and dealing with hits, and all that comes with being in the mafia. So it was just super revolutionary for its time. It still is. I rewatched most of it over during quarantine, and then kind of left off right as I was getting ready to move, midway through season 6. So I would like to actually get back to it and finish it. This will be like my third rewatch of the
Oh
show.
wow.
You just find new things to love and appreciate about it, every time you watch it. And like I said, this fantastic book, The Sopranos Sessions, by Alan Sepinwall and Matt Zollis Dietz, I think his name is. I always get the last name confused. But they provide a series of critical essays on every episode of the show.
Oh, I
And
would
it just,
love to check that out.
yeah, you really should. It is a great companion piece, examining each episode, each of every season, and it's fascinating. It is a great read. I got it midway through my rewatch of the series, and it um, opens your eyes to things you may have missed, and also provides a few nuggets about how the behind the scenes, how things evolved and changed. Like the show was originally, David Chase originally was thinking of season 4 as the final season, and
Oh,
that obviously was not the case, and it went on for 2 more seasons, and arguably season 5 is its best season ever, and its final episodes are unforgettable. But little details like that help you contextualize why the show is the way it is. Very much worth the $20 or however much it was on Amazon. I would highly recommend it. It just makes the viewing experience even better.
I mean, that's awesome. Yeah, because it's very rare that I'll watch a TV show or even a movie, because I am so much more drawn to fiction, that makes me just like immediately want to read about its development. Like a lot of times, even though I like TV, like I loved the first season of Fargo that I finally just watched recently, but The Sopranos does have such a literary feel that I'm just like immediately
Very literary show for 100%.
I did want to shift gears for a second though,
Yeah, please.
because just for like you as a writer, can you think of maybe a time in high school or earlier, or maybe after, that you either saw a movie or saw a TV show or read a book that really just like opened your brain to the possibilities that were in storytelling? You tell me yours, and then I'll tell you some of mine.
Um, that is a great question. There were like one of them I would say relates to The Sopranos, actually.
Cool.
God knows what my parents were thinking, but fifth or sixth grade, maybe younger, checking The Sopranos out on VHS, cassette from the library. And I thank God I'm not like more fucked up than I am, because there's some stuff in there, particularly the episode. I remember seeing there's an episode in season 3. I won't give it away, the plot away. Employee of the Month, and it just hits you like a sledgehammer, and it just like, oh my God, I like want to. I love television. Like this is like, you can do this. Like what? And obviously I was younger, probably 6th grade at that point. But I think like being able watching The Sopranos at a kind of a young age, and it just really formulated my taste in TV and taste in entertainment. And you know, I was introduced to like all the other HBO shows, like the peak HBO, and a lot of that I think influenced the type of stories I wanted to tell, like mature, character-driven dramas, maybe a little edge to them. But then I also think about of all shows, ER. There's
Okay.
the long running medical drama. There's the famous season 6 episode,
Oh,
All in the
like
Family.
specifically, not even just the series, but like,
Well, the series too in general, but there's this one very famous episode where with a big twist in it, and it they kill off a character and leave another one hanging in peril. And I knew the history of it, and like how it it was came as such a shock to like ER viewers, and like it's one of its highest rated episodes, and it just like people were so taken aback by it. And I with television, I miss the sense of community that like I don't know if you like appointment television, and being able to have a big audience watching characters grow over the years and being so invested in certain characters that when something catastrophic happens to them, it is just, mind-boggling, and the emotion that it can elicit. And I feel like that watching that in my senior year of high school just like really solidified my like desire to like write in television. So those are two, like, I guess, like TV examples. There are countless. I obviously we all have multiple influences and like, books that we read, certainly books that I read that had a huge impact on me, and again, story in the way that I want to tell stories, and certain films that I watched, Adaptation, Spike Jonze's Adaptation from Charlie Kaufman, that it was an enormously influential for me. But yeah, I want to hear what yours is. Sorry for all that rambling.
No, that's perfect. And it's funny you say Charlie Kaufman too, because he, I think, is somebody that is so experimental and like postmodern and referential to storytelling, but then they're so entertaining, and like the fact that he's able to be that popular with someone who, like, all things considered, is kind of an academic storyteller, and it should be more niche than it is, I think, but
Yeah,
it really
yeah,
speaks to his talent. Because I guess I could kind of go backwards then, because Synecdoche, New York, his first feature that he directed,
yep,
I think when I saw that my freshman year of college, was just so affecting and so experimental, but not in a super heady way. Like when it ended, I wasn't like, oh, how clever and profound. I was just like, that was so dreamlike and depressing, but I don't know why. And like, I didn't get it, but it just like, it was definitely one of those films, because I kind of got to like Kubrick and David Lynch a little bit later. Uh,
yeah.
but it was, I think, just one of those first like truly experimental films that like really just opened my eyes to the like just amazing things you can do with like really weird creative scene work, and like really
Absolutely.
breaking the rules type of directing. So loved that one. Loved his novel recently. I'm going on a tangent, so I'll get to the rest of them in a second. But are you familiar with like Antkind?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay,
Wait, is that
that sounded foreboding.
his novel that he wrote?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it. It's a little it's a little much, but I have not read it, so I can't judge it.
So I read it, and I would 100% agree that like overall it's way too much. Like it, about three-fourths of the way through, or I'll be positive. The first three-fourths of it and the last like eighth of it are amazing. Like brilliant narrative voice, really vivid, fun absurdity that you really see what he's going for. But there's this chunk of maybe 200 pages, maybe a little less than that, where you're just like, I don't know what you were thinking. Like, and not even like, oh, it was too graphic, or like, but I'm just seriously like, as a reader, and I feel like, not that I'm like the smartest man in the world, but I am very experienced in reading like postmodern novels. I was just like, I don't know what the fuck he was trying to say at all.
I heard it was just a little self-indulgent and like a little too unfiltered, for
Yeah.
Charlie Kaufman. Again, I can't judge it. I haven't read it, and I typically uh, probably not the type of novel that I would be reading. Well, then again, I don't think I have a particular type of novel that I read, but it didn't sound. I really do love him, but it didn't like jump out at me. But that's really interesting to hear coming. Yeah, I can see how it could be that kind of experience.
That's the thing. And like I've talked about him enough on this channel, specifically that book, that like I don't think I need to dwell on it too much. But overall, I have a lot of positive things to say about that book, but it, I think, is just disappointing, because so much of it was so good and really clearly realized its intentions. And then I really wanted me to be the problem when I was reading it. It's like, oh, I just don't get it. But it's like I felt kind of backed into a corner by the end where I was like, I just don't really know if it says anything clear enough, at least that part of it, for me to ever want to try to figure it out. Like it just
Yeah.
it was
Uh,
so strange. But okay, so then I guess for a film, and I've probably mentioned this to you before, but Minority Report was a movie that I saw when I was about 9. I think it came out in 2004, and specifically one scene too, because I loved the whole movie. I love Tom Cruise's performance, but this isn't really a spoiler because it happens like halfway through. And also, if you haven't seen this movie yet, you're probably not going to anytime soon. But um, the central premise obviously is that they have the precogs who can tell that murders are going to happen before they do. Tom Cruise is in the pre-crime division, arrests people before they commit murders, and then of course his name comes up that he's going to murder someone. So then in like a separate thread, it's established that he had a son who was abducted and presumed dead after they went to a swimming pool. And the whole time after he's destined to kill somebody, he's like, I would never kill anyone. There must be some mistake. But then, of course, he ends up entering this room with the guy he's supposed to kill, and spread out all over the bed are pictures of his son and other children that are presumed abducted. And in this one moment, he's like, okay, I am going to kill this guy. Like, this all makes sense now. But what's really cool is that he's pointing the gun at him, and the little watch has the timer, and it's counting down to the moment when he's supposed to kill it, and it hits 0, and he reads him his Miranda rights instead of shooting him. And he's like, you have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can't. And so like he basically, by not doing anything, has this really evocative character action that basically says destiny is bullshit. You have choice and human potential to steer your own destiny. And like I wouldn't have been able to tell you that when I was 9. I just thought it was like an emotionally loaded scene, but I just thought that writing was so cool, and it said so much with literally not doing anything. Like his character choice was to not arrest the guy or not shoot him, you know?
it's funny how those moments, like again with The Sopranos, like when I was watching it, probably, when I was roughly the same age, a lot of stuff obviously went over my head, but somehow little things resonate with you still, and you come to appreciate them more the older you get, and the more you understand about storytelling. It's funny. I never, for whatever reason, I just imagine you watching Kubrick and Lynch at like 9. I never imagined you watching like a movie like Minority Report. That's very surprising, but I've never actually seen it. I've only heard good things about it.
It's one of those movies that people do kind of like smirk when I mention how much I like it. And then if they get around to watching it, I don't know if anyone loves it, but they're usually like, oh, okay, that was actually pretty cool.
Yep,
So
that's kind of what I've heard.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll definitely take it. But I think that is like one of the powerful things about storytelling too, is that to write like a critical essay about Minority Report at age 9 would have been a disaster. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it. But just with the basic elements of storytelling, of just like dialogue, character action, plot, premise, theme, they're able to communicate something to somebody who doesn't have any kind of background or experience in that kind of thing. So that is like, I guess, to get on my soapbox, even though descriptions of those moments can sound really heady and academic, it's only that way because you have to put it into words. But like the actual moment in a film can be very easy to understand. It's just hard to like describe without having to write an essay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm just laughing. I'm thinking about, you know, how you talk about at that age being influenced by these more mature like pieces of art. And I just wish you could, I wish I probably have them in a box out there. Some of the short stories and scripts that I wrote at like, in elementary school and like middle school that were like so deeply influenced by like The Sopranos and Under, and like I'm not talking like mafia but like we're trying to be these like really mature, gritty, like violent stories, and like how absolutely ludicrous. I remember there was one script I wrote. All I remember it had something to do with serial murders and someone cutting off their face and like
Oh, sure.
hiding beneath and like just like absolutely batshit stupid and like but like at a certain age, Fargo. I saw Fargo a little later on. I saw that in ninth grade, and the first like one of the first films I made in high school was like so influenced by Fargo. Like it was like trying to have like a quirky sense of humor. I get that Midwestern sense of humor and like set in like a snow. I just took all the superficial things that I liked from it and put it in my shitty, adolescent storytelling. But it's you thinking about all of this, it brings up how influenced we were or I was at a young age. It's ridiculous.
Well, you made me remember too, and I don't think I would have remembered this unless you specifically said it, that I too at one point, I think in middle school, had some outline or kind of half draft of like a serial killer story that like I almost feel like it's a rite of passage as a young writer that
Oh,
you have to go down
absolutely.
that road just to see why not to.
I also like love the Oscar. I still enjoy. Well, not as much, but I was like really into the Oscars and like awards shows. So I feel like I came up with a lot of like Oscar bait stories, like stories that I thought were like, prestigious and like, really emotional and like it didn't freaking make any sense or like, oh god, I wish I could remember some of them. I just know like I had that in my brain and I wanted to like tell these like big, exciting, emotional stories. I also somehow thought that it would make me like a hit with the ladies in like high school and stuff by
Sure.
like
Yeah,
telling these
you're
like
deep. You
mature
get it.
stories.
Yeah.
Very weird. There's something to examine there, but yeah, I it is funny our
Well, I remember too. I don't think I ever ended up writing anything for this, but when I was at summer camp, we had to do like a day of work as a part of this like program where we were like clearing branches, and we weren't allowed to talk to anybody because it wasn't like punishment, but it was like part of this weird kind of culturally appropriative Native American thing during the camp. Like you might be kind of familiar with some of the Boy Scouts activities in that.
yeah.
And so we had to take like a day of silence and clear this brush. And at the time, I was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13. And this brilliant story occurred to me of to have these two lovers on a deserted desert island. And I remember the lines were going to be something like, he held her. She was sick and dying, but he held her. And just like thinking it was just this literary gold. And like everyone was just going to be floored with this brilliant idea where it was really just like kind of, I think, like lust
Yeah.
transmuted into a story idea and then like never pursued it at all.
My friggin' senior year of high school, I throughout high school, I like was trying to make TV because obviously I loved TV. And senior year of high school, I wrote a TV show called Dealerette, which was basically Weeds, but with teenagers. And it was supposed to be about like a teenage girl that is like the anti hero kind of selling weed. And like, I just remember putting a really graphic sex scene into the script because that's what they do on the Sopranos and that's what they do
Sure.
on Weeds.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I like gave that to people to read and like we were gonna like shoot that, and people were like, how are we gonna do this scene where she gets eaten out by like her boyfriend?
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
God.
oh my god, what was I thinking? Like I it's really crazy how even in high school, like those influences, I was just like trying to create prestige TV in the halls of Pembroke High School. Oh boy. Thank God that never happened. I think we shot like a frame of it and that's it.
maybe
Ooh,
for the best.
yeah, probably.
That is, I think, fascinating to me too, because I think probably when I was in college and I was like more arrogant and I thought I knew everything, I kind of thought I knew what a story was. But more recently, but then especially when I was super young, it's just fascinating to think like I just had no idea what a story even was. And like I did feel this compulsion to write, but it was always like you said, kind of stealing these like superficial things that I liked from something and having no clue about anything
Yep,
about like an arc
100%.
or suspense or pacing of how you get information out
Oh,
there.
pacing was my big thing. Like everything was rushed. Like I didn't know how. It's like I didn't know how to count from 1 to 10. I like knew two, two, three, 9, 10, and like it was all just like mushed together and made no logical sense. I just didn't know how to take my time and tell things organically. But of course, that's what college is for. You go to college, you learn you learn how to do this, and then you just write. I everything I've written since college, has just been those are the pieces that I'm still hanging on to and that I feel most proud of. Even some of the stuff that I wrote in college is it's not obviously my best work, but it's kind of it's more mature and it makes sense and doesn't have stupid character names like Hugo Bass or Arnold Rasputin. uh
Wow, that sounds like
Stylus Menesiolak. I just pulled that one out of my ass. But yeah, I was notorious with my friends in high school for like coming up with the worst character names.
you know what
Um,
though? I'll take Arnold Rasputin any day over like Jimmy. Like I don't see why anybody, especially like nowadays, I get if you're writing in the 1950s, sure, be Jimmy. But it's like, how are you gonna name your character Jimmy or Johnny or Billy or Bobby? Drives me crazy.
yeah, I even still, I probably I try to skew a little bit weirder, I guess. I don't know. It's a very weird balance. Don't ask me how I name my characters. Um, but yeah, you just the most basic of advice. You just get better the more you write. So that's been my trick.
That is true, and I think that was hard for me to accept because I thought, especially in college, that if I could consume a hard movie or read a hard book and get it, then I thought that somehow said something about my ability. Whereas, like, that's so arrogant. But what it really says is that it's like, no, that writer is very talented or that director is very talented that they could communicate those ideas to you. It has nothing to do with you. And then, like, you try to do it, and then you're like, oh, okay, like I'm going to be working on developing this skill for the rest of my life. This is
Yes.
not like,
Oh, that's the
oh, I
perfect
get it
solution.
now, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It is, you really appreciate that's what I think that's why to go back to the Sopranos, I love it so much is it had such an impact on me. And like, I looked at it very superficially when I was watching it when I was younger. And now as I'm older and I'm trying to do, you tell stories that good. I just, I'm so in awe of what they accomplished. So, and I have a lot more respect and understanding for it than I did when I was like 10 or 11 and watching it on VHS for the very first time. So, I think that's why it was so influential for me and, in the greater scheme, television as a whole. So,
That's why I think too, I am a little skeptical of people that are like a little snooty about something that might be considered like only entertainment or like kind of the more popular cozy comedy movies and things like that. And I get that like I definitely have a more academic interest in novels specifically. And so I'm sure I've said plenty of things on this channel and in my daily life that read is very pretentious. And maybe I just was being pretentious. But that being said, it does bug me when some people just like really proudly dismiss something that isn't like high art because it kind of gives away that it's like you don't know how hard it is to make anything at all, let
Yeah.
alone like a transcendent piece of art. Like it's almost like they're saying, "Oh, well, if I had a choice, I would make a transcendent piece of art." And it's like, yeah, that's what we're all fucking trying to do. Like, is to make something that's really deep and amazing, even if it is a comedy or something that's just supposed to be more fun. There's still
And you know what?
so much that goes into it.
And it means different stuff to different people. Like, the Marvel movies. I really don't care about Marvel at
Yeah.
all. And but I can understand their appeal. I know people like have that strong emotional connection to those characters, whether it's from reading the comic books growing up or, heck, I loved Spider-Man and Batman when I was younger. And yeah, I get that. I don't really care about it as much now, but you know, um, maybe Batman a little bit. I do like those movies, but I'm like, well, we don't need to like be saying, oh, Marvel isn't cinema. Like, it's a pretty impressive piece of like filmmaking and storytelling, especially when you look at it as all those interconnected universes. Again, not my cup of tea, but why shit on a whole like people that those movies mean so much to some people? Why do we have to take away someone's love of, why do we have to bash someone's love of a particular type of story? Like, we can all, you can have your Charlie Kaufmans, I can have my Sopranos, that people can have, Iron Man and the Hulk. It doesn't hurt anyone. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And I think part of me saying that is probably almost to like knock on wood, being like, I don't want to come across as somebody that's like only into the deep stuff or the stuff you've got to read 5 times to wrap your head around. Because to make
You
something that
did walk out of Christmas with the Cranks at Thanksgiving last year, which
okay, you know what, you're right. I did.
that movie was brilliant, and you left midway through it. So a little
Called
hoity-toity of
me
you.
out. Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously just I mean, well, this is obvious, but I obviously don't like everything.
Yeah, of
But
course not. I don't like everything either, but
the thing is too, it's like I'm sure, and maybe I'm just saying this to back up my own bullshit, is to like, I'll bet if I watched Christmas with the Cranks, I could find something I could learn from it from a writing perspective. I don't know if I'd enjoy it.
uh well,
Is it too hopeful? Is that too hopeful?
I truly don't think you'd find anything to learn from Christmas with the
Really?
Cranks,
Oh,
but maybe if you did, my hat off to you. But I know what you're saying. I know what you're
yeah.
saying.
Okay. Yeah. Because I guess like I wonder about that, just even just for the purposes of this channel, is that the videos of mine that have done the best have been me like analyzing these books that are considered like maybe not the hardest in the world, but if you're new to that style of writing, can require like a couple extra resources and like maybe read some essays or watch some videos to read. And so when I've tried to dip into some more accessible stuff just to spread myself out a little bit more, I just haven't seen the interest there. So, but maybe it's not because it's like easier, but they're just not as like popular, or I don't even know. But I guess that's my interest in like trying to be inspired by the great people, but or like the greats, but then also the commercial entertainment too.
I mean, it's just like that book I was talking about, the Sopranos sessions. I mean, you look at the Sopranos, and the Sopranos multi-layered, complex show, and sometimes it's helpful. It's enjoyable to have that extra, you know, um, that extra thing to read to help bring perspective to the piece. That's what you're doing with your videos. Commentary is helpful. It's useful. It can aid and enhance the viewing reading experience. So yeah, I
So,
totally get that.
okay, so in that case, can you think of like maybe just off the top of your head, what is something that you absolutely love that you would consider like on the other end of the spectrum? Like you would never need a critical essay to dive into.
Oh, Wet Hot American Summer.
Oh, I love Wet Hot American
I
Summer.
don't think I need a critical essay on Wet Hot American Summer, but that is one of MacGruber. I think MacGruber and Wet
Yeah.
Hot American Summer are like my two favorite comedy films, and they are absolutely brilliant and so well done. But I don't exactly need an essay
Sure.
breaking them down. But they're two like genius comedy movies, you know. Comedy is very difficult. I can't do it, but you know, I can't write it at least. So I have huge respect for people that can do something like that and make it work, you know. What about you?
Yeah, I would say my mind immediately goes to comedies too. And I think like oddly enough, I don't know if this is one of my favorite movies, but one that I kind of throw out as an example a lot is like Horrible Bosses.
Oh yeah.
That it's like, and usually when I bring this up to people, they are kind of like, "Oh, really?" And I'm like, you know what? One, I was entertained the entire movie,
Yep,
and
I
two,
agree.
it's not one of those comedies that shirks its storytelling either. Like I thought the story and especially the end where they kind of use the like Siri device in the car to record Kevin Spacey to implicate him when he like says I even forget the details, but like I just remember sitting in the theater and thinking like that was actually like a really tight, well crafted story to
Yeah, absolutely.
good commercial comedy, you know?
Game Night is another one that probably the most recent. That is really it's same thing. Really good ensemble, very just well written comedy, very funny. You know, not mind blowing or anything. You know, I wouldn't put it up there necessarily with like MacGruber and Wet Hot American Summer, but you know, it's just a really well done comedy, and people are kind of like, but like. I don't know. I love those kind of movies. Like when they're really funny and just really well. The cast was everyone was perfectly cast in that movie. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, I think that too for a lot of like Tina Fey's shows. Like I've been rewatching 30 Rock and Kimmy Schmidt too. I
30
just
Rock is a lot. 30 Rock is something you could do write essays on because it's one of the like the all-time great TV comedies of like that is one I think there's depth to it, you know, even beyond it's absurd, but there's depth to it. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
no, yeah. Well, and even too, because yeah, like I guess that one's not as much of a hot take because that is such a beloved show, but undoubtedly it is like silly. They really
Yeah,
go
oh
for like
yeah.
silly, and I think sometimes it's easy to brush silly off as like frivolous, but it's like it's not insubstantial. They just like really let themselves go for these really silly sensibilities.
Absolutely. No, yeah, you were so right. That's why comedy gets the short thrift sometimes because being silly isn't seen as serious, you know? And I'm no expert to speak on comedy, but you know, I mean, that was a friggin' brilliant show. Such a great show. That's one I need to rewatch myself. I loved that show. Fun fact: I was in the audience for the live episode, the first live episode they did. Uh, I was got tickets to the West Coast taping of 30 Rock's live episode, which was one of the highlights of my life was seeing that done live. It was incredible.
That's awesome.
And
That's
having
like
Lorne Michaels like standing behind me, being like, fuck, Lorne Michaels is standing right behind me.
that is like really something that I think before I moved to LA, I would have cynically told you like, oh, I wouldn't even care. But I would find myself getting so excited to see people from TV that I didn't even watch their shows or like hadn't consumed any of their content, but I just knew that they were a person and feeling like butterflies of like, oh my God, they're like right there.
I know. Absolutely. Yeah, um when I was in line, this was again, I was in between colleges at the time, but Michael Engler, the director, he directed for 30 Rock, but he's gone on to like direct a ton of Downton Abbey, and he's directed so many different West Wing, uh Deadwood, bunch so many different did he do Deadwood? Maybe I'm making that one up. I know he did some prestige. He do Sex in the City. He's done a bunch of different shows. And he was in front of me and I got to talking with him.
Oh, that's
And that was cool. Like I knew I was like, oh, what? That's so cool. But yeah, I would still get star-studded over people like that, I think.
oh my gosh, yeah. Like I think my biggest one, because like I even got excited about like Fabio, and Fabio is like such a cultural joke, kind of. No offense to Fabio, but like seeing him, I had no expectation that I would care to have seen Fabio in the sushi restaurant that I did delivery for. But I ended up seeing him, and there's like several times, and it was just like exciting. But I think the one that got me the most is that I got tickets at the New Beverly to see Uncut Gems when they did the director's comment, not director's commentary, the director's Q&A afterward. So the Safdie brothers were there, and then I look over afterwards, and Paul Thomas Anderson is standing in the double doors, and the New Beverly is small, so he was like probably like 15 feet away from me, and I just like put my head down and like said under my breath to the guy next to me, I was like, "That is like Paul Thomas Anderson." Like he in addition to being a general inspiration, like specifically inspired both my first book and the book that I'm working on right now, and I just
Oh,
melted. Just even to see him
yeah,
in the room was just like, oh my god, I couldn't believe it.
yeah, I would have felt the same way. Yeah, that would have done it for me. I Oh God, I'm trying to think. There have been some people. I went to the Austin Film Festival one year, and I got to see some cool panels down there. And there was some really cool writers on, the TV writers in particular. George Pelicanos. Not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a novelist, but he works with David Simon a lot, and he like uh, co-created The Deuce, and he wrote on The Wire. And I remember seeing him, was like, whoa, that's George. He wrote Middle Ground, and like Kirk Ellis, who wrote John Adams, the miniseries, which I loved. And sometimes it's the writers that really get me. I'm like, wow, well, like, will you just talk? Of course, I was too nervous at the time. I was younger and I was too nervous to like, I couldn't bring myself to do questions, but it was yeah, just listening to them talk about the craft was like mind blowing. So
That
I,
is
I get it.
yeah. This actually kind of conveniently leads me back to one of those earlier inspirations, but I got to see Lemony Snicket do a talk at Rainy
Oh
Day Book,
wow.
or it was either Rainy Day Books or Reptile Books here in Kansas City, when I think I was in middle school, and that was when I was first going through that book series. And my parents will still bring this up sometimes because I was like so nervous when he signed my book that my hands were in my pockets, and I was like really trying to play it cool and was just like nodding because I was just like, holy shit, like probably one of the first like famous people that I've met, if not the first. And I think just to segue back into that like other conversation, like it was, in addition to being so funny and so entertaining, his books really are very like self-aware, and he frequently like steps outside of the story to comment on storytelling. And
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of the shtick is that like he has a pen name, and he does little dedications at the beginning of the book to his like dead lover Beatrice, and like
yeah.
some
Oh
of the
god, I
plot
remember.
points like end up kind of paying off some of that like off the page information. And I just remember in middle school thinking that was like so clever and just so fun, and but also like really breaking the rules. Like I just have never read a book like this, and I didn't know you were allowed to to be that like aware. And
Yes. Yeah.
so
Oh,
amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
love that.
Um Oh, were you gonna say something? Or
No.
oh,
I remember I'm feeling a lot of the same things when I read those books. Those were, oh, fantastic. That's how you write a children's book right there.
yeah, because it did feel like he really wasn't talking down to you. Like it felt
Yeah,
super
exactly.
clever, and it felt like he was kind of like letting you in on this like almost like highbrow, different way of approaching things.
You
Uh,
are absolutely right with, yeah. Oh,
but then I think one of the earliest ones, like I think the first book that I read that I actually enjoyed was Holes by Louis Sachar or Sachar. I don't know if I'm saying
oh my
it right.
God. Yes. I haven't thought about that one in a long time.
Yeah, like I think what really struck me about it is I just remember thinking it was so interesting that they had the prophecy of Madame Zeroni putting a curse on, or it's not a prophecy, it's the curse she puts on the dirty pig stealing grandpa. And that at the end he breaks the curse by like carrying Zero up the mountain. And I I just remember thinking like in fourth grade, like that was just so clever that they managed to break the curse by this like kind of indirect way. And it's just great storytelling. And
It is. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's funny. That just brings back memories of our fourth grade teacher reading story. I think she read Holes to us. Imagine that back in the day when in fourth grade you could get away with having a teacher just read to you for. She would literally do like voices and stuff. She read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I remember there was nothing better. Like we were on the edge of our seats listening to that, and like she would do a chapter like a day, and we would just we loved it. It was like the best part of the day was Mrs. Lovett reading a chapter of Harry Potter and doing all the voices, and then um slowly watching it come together and stuff. Anyways, yeah,
my
oh,
my dad read us Harry Potter, I think up until like the third book, so just the first three. But I just remember that feeling when the chapter would end and just this like, oh, like you have to do another one, and he's like, no, it's time to go to bed. But because
yep.
what he would do is such like a dad move is that he would always be like, and then Ron, Harry, and Hermione went to McDonald's and got some French fries, and like he'd throw in something like that, and we'd be like, oh no, like it's over. But that like obviously Harry Potter is like one of the most popular story franchises of all time, but I just remember being so captivated
Oh,
every time you
absolutely.
go through it. It's like it's so relatable, but so just like makes your imagination go wild.
My mom started reading the Lord of the Rings books to me. And eventually I think like halfway through like Fellowship, I ended up just reading it myself. But I think now about like my poor mother, like that's a wordy book to be like reading to a reading to your child at night. But same thing. I just remember being so captivated by it, and oh, I miss being read to at night. That was like the peak. That was amazing. And be like that probably influenced why I love reading and writing so much is, you know, read to your child, America. That's why I came here to say. Read to your children.
This actually is a heavily political podcast, and so
Mhm.
we think that is basically the central problem that's tearing this nation apart right now. Is not enough people getting read to.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, so anyway, I think probably the last one I'll mention, even though there have been plenty, is that in high school I had to read A Prayer for Owen Meany by John
Oh,
Irving.
yeah. Yes.
I think that set me up for high school to like continue reading a ton of his books. I haven't read all of John Irving's books, but kind of similar to Holes, they introduce. Have you read A Prayer for Owen Meany?
No, I know of it, but I've never read it.
Okay, so it's like, I mean, do you care if I spoil it for you?
Why not? I'm probably not going to
It's
read
only
it.
like one thread of the book. Like there's a lot more to it, but um, they keep practicing this basketball shot because Owen Meany is like a really tiny guy, and so throughout the novel they keep practicing this basketball shot where the narrator like picks him up and he has him dunk the basketball. But then in the last scene, somebody like enters a room with a grenade and they have to like do the shot they've been practicing the whole time. And like I guess as I'm describing it now, it sounds like super absurd, but it all kind of at the time like spoke to me as this thing of like just such a great example of like planting and payoff. And like a lot of
Yes.
the theme
Yeah.
was about like destiny. And so something I always like consider really good in writing is like not just a bunch of great moments stacked together, but when it's like you really see it as a whole piece where they planted something and then pay it off so beautifully at the end. And so,
So Owen Meany slam dunks a grenade?
well, no, I think he dies. It's like he like I it's been I haven't read this since I was like 14 or
I'm
15.
gonna look this up on Wikipedia when we finish, but uh
I'm not describing it very elegantly, but they like he they do the basketball shot that they've been practicing for the entire book, but it's with a grenade. And I think Owen Meany like saves everybody, but he dies by like taking this grenade up and then like doing that move.
interesting.
Yeah, so um
That's
that's read is like very
silly.
but
That's really weird.
it is weird, but I think just like when I read that at the time, I just thought it was so clever, and it really felt
Sure.
like I
Yeah.
said, like it just kind of tied everything together, and like it made it felt like it was all worth it throughout. And then you
Okay.
know what though, John Irving, his stuff is kind of absurd. There's a lot of like unicycling bears in his novels, so like they're grounded
So
in
it's a
reality.
unicycling bear that comes in with a grenade?
So not with the grenade, but like I think even on his Wikipedia page, there's like a table that shows like recurring imagery in his books, and I think like bears is one of the rows, and there's like x's that check how many novels, and there's like many novels of his that have like bears coming in, not always for even any symbolic effect, but of just like he just puts in Hotel New Hampshire, one of the characters is like in a bear costume, and I if I remember correctly, it's not ever like really explained. It's just like somebody walking around in a bear costume.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
just one of his quirky things, I guess. But um, so I feel like we're kind of reaching the end here. Do we have we can keep it going for like a little bit longer, but
No,
do you
I feel like it's up to you. I feel like we've this has been great. I've really enjoyed this. Like I said, I haven't had a good conversation like this on the craft in ages. It's so good to talk to you and just like ramble about the Sopranos and my inspirations. This is fantastic.
well, I mean, you too, dude, and that's a big reason I wanted to do this is that like I find editing and making those videos kind of daunting, even though I kind of throw them together. And so I really wanted a way to like make some longer form content where we get some multiple voices in the room, and it's actually like enjoyable to do instead of like like a lot of the other videos kind of seem like work. Like I'm putting all this thing into
Sure,
this is just
sure.
like and I know I've said this to you word for word before, but like this is literally my favorite thing to talk about. And it seems like it's hard to inject into a conversation a lot of like, let's steer things toward writing advice and like what we like about the structure of our favorite shows.
Well, it was just like when we started that, when you was starting that like writing group, like, and then of course, I went to Malaysia for, like you started the writing group. I went to Malaysia for work, and then COVID happened, and it was over. But like, it was such a great opportunity to talk about this. We did it once, and it was like, you could tell it was going to be great, like talking about this and just workshopping stuff and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this was fantastic. Have you done a ton of these?
So this is the third one, and I think I have like 3 or 4 more planned. But maybe I could get you and Alex on at the same time some point in the future to like maybe ask you guys some specific questions about your collaborations or even
Yeah, definitely.
it's of the project that you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome. I bet I could convince him to do it. He's
Yeah,
a
well,
wily.
and we can like put a time frame on it too, because I'm still like it's still so new. I don't even want to dictate it too much because like I
Sure.
can't fully expect anyone who is watching it to like watch a full 2 hours, but it's kind of just like
I imagine it's something you put on in the background, when you're like
Sure.
working, people would probably listen to it more as a podcast than they would a video.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping the vibe is too, is that like it's just gonna turn into maybe something that you'll watch after you've already invested in the channel a little bit more. But I don't know.
Sure.
That's why I'm not even gonna try to dictate it too much. I'm just gonna
Well,
let
I'm
it go.
expecting this video will be the most popular yet, because
All of you.
I'm on it. My cult fan base will be turning out to see my beautiful mug.
Well, that's why I asked you, is because it was just kind of selfish. I just needed to boost my own signal, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
scale up and like really get those views. So
there we go.
the guy to
Have you
ask,
had Sean and Sabrina on? Or
they're
Sean?
going to be on tomorrow, actually.
Oh, oh, I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, so they're going to be on tomorrow, and I thought for them too, because I've had a lot of really good conversations with Sean about like creativity and mental health. So I kind of threw it out there, like
That'll be a good one.
we could focus the conversation on that, and like yeah, just to sort of see where it goes, because not even out of any kind of like this is an important topic that we need to get out there,
It's
but
an interesting topic.
it's super interesting, and it's just like yeah, like I just know we both have a lot to say about that, and so I think it would be fun. And I haven't talked to Sabrina about that at all either, but I know she would have a lot to say about it too. So
Yes, me too. I know she will have a lot to say.
yeah.
Um, oh, that's great. Yeah, you should keep this going. I would come back. I know that's presumptuous to say, but I would come
Well,
back and
we're
talk
gonna
about.
see the final edit on this one. Don't get ahead of yourself.
It's just gonna be you talking to a black screen for. I've been completely edited out of this whole talk.
No, I'm gonna overdub your moving mouth with compliments for my manuscript that I just sent. And like anytime you're praising the Sopranos, I'll insert with my own voice. Your manuscript you just sent me changed television.
It would be understandable. Truly.
Well, I was
Yes.
thinking too that it might be kind of interesting to actually have you give me notes in a similar forum. And so I don't know if I would post like a version of the scene you're specifically talking about in the comments, or how much context you would really need. But I thought it might be kind of fun to like to focus it maybe on some sort of like feedback session, you know?
Interesting. Yeah, that could be really interesting. I'd be glad, even if it's not recorded, I'd be glad to hop on Zoom and discuss it with you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think that like just as somebody, I don't know if I search YouTube a whole lot anymore for writing advice, but especially in college, I think so much of it is kind of surfacey and about like building up the courage to write, that
Yeah.
like I remember always wanting something of like, how do I edit a scene? Like, how do I actually take the ideas that I have and like really get into the nitty gritty to make this thing better? So I think it'd be fun to like have some kind of boots on the ground version of that, you know?
Yes. Um, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I think I need to take this.
Okay, well
But
then, yeah, let's wrap that up.
yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I hope something that we talked about today will help you write better stories. Have a good one, Robert.
Write better stories, everyone, and read to your kids.
Exactly. Yeah, read to those kids. All right, see you. Dude.
Okay. Thanks, Danny. Bye.
Have a good one.